Good morning, Dawg Nation. I'm Brandon Adams, and this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented today by Merriweather and Tharp. Jam-packed show for us, continuing to get ready for Georgia-Florida on Saturday, both in terms of why some think that Georgia may be in some trouble, but why the real story of the game may be the quiet emergence of Georgia over the course of recent weeks, maybe the next step in all of that taken against these lousy, stinking Gators on Saturday. Terrence Edwards helps us get ready for all of that, too. And there is some chaos going on around the SEC, including the LSU coaching search, getting very, very interesting here right now. A lot of drama coming out of Baton Rouge. We'll talk about that some on the program today, too. A little bit on Gunnar Stockton mixed in on all of this, so a lot of fun. Glad to have you with us for it. It's a big one for us, of course. We believe this is the rivalry that matters more than any other for Georgia, so you know we're going to be doing everything we can to help you get ready for it. So without further ado, let's get to it. It is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented today by Merriweather and Tharp, and it begins right now.
Today's episode of DawgNation Daily is brought to you by Merriweather and Tharp, your source for Georgia divorce. Find them online at georgiadivorceteam.com.
Presented by DawgNation.com. This is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. Here's your host, Brandon Adams.
One of the interesting things to me is how sports is talked about differently, say, on the internet, whether it be streaming video podcast or, kind of what we do, or print, written word, compared to the more traditional venue of television. It's amazing to me that the line between what we think of as TV, what we think of as video, that line is almost non-existent now, and yet there is still, on traditional TV shows, a manner of speaking about sports that just doesn't fit in with the other sports conversations anywhere else. And I don't even know that it's necessarily a bad thing. It's just a different thing. A lot of sports on TV, I would say, is more meant to have on as opposed to actually watch closely, listen to carefully. It's just sometimes meant to be background noise at a bar or a doctor's office waiting room or something along those lines. Hey, turn on ESPN or turn on the SEC network because it's just the most palatable background noise sometimes. But when you listen carefully, every now and then you hear something that's like, I don't know that necessarily matches up exactly with the feeling of the more plugged-in sports fans, which mostly do their conversing on the internet these days. For instance, I was watching the SEC network, and I like a lot of the stuff the SEC network does. It's not meant to be a criticism. I'm just saying it's different. Alyssa Lang is the host. She's talking to Gene Chizik, and they're talking about the Georgia-Florida game coming up on Saturday. And the way this gets spun on TV in what I would kind of describe as an old school way is, well, it's Georgia that's the high-ranked team. It's Georgia, as Alyssa Lang pointed out, which is actually kind of an interesting stat, that hasn't lost to an unranked opponent since 2019. It's Georgia that comes in seemingly, in a much better position than Florida, which fired its coach. But she basically turns and pivots to Gene Chizik. Is there a chance that Florida could somehow pull the upset? And then Chizik, in selling all of this, the former Auburn coach, a guy who's been pretty, involved in the SEC for quite some time and a couple of different stints as an SEC network analyst. Well, he runs into this whole thing of, right now for 2 weeks, Florida's been hearing about how they got no chance to beat Georgia and how this is just an impossible dream and Georgia's going to run right through you. And as I'm listening to that, in my mind, I'm like, boy, that doesn't reflect the internet conversation at all. If anything, the internet conversation, we've admittedly contributed some of this, think that Florida is now more dangerous because of its interim coaching staff, a little trickier to deal with. We already thought it's a dangerous game for Georgia because in the SEC right now, that is seemingly all that gets played. Florida's already won as a fairly sizable underdog against Texas earlier this season. That certainly stranger things have happened than this. Somehow Florida could play it close with Georgia or actually beat Georgia. We just don't think that matches reality at all. And most of the internet conversation, whether it be the things you have going back and forth on social media, the stuff that we do for a living here, podcast, video, mostly reflects Florida as a pretty dangerous underdog in this game, different than the way that it's being spun on TV. But nonetheless, just for fun, let you hear Gene Chizik talking up. This is the former Auburn coach, now working as an SEC network analyst. One aspect of Florida that he thinks could be dangerous for Georgia on Saturday. And in this respect, we think Chizik is probably telling the truth and is right about this. Here is the former Auburn coach.
defensively, the defense has held them in every single football game. It's the reason they beat Mississippi State. It's the reason they beat Texas. I don't expect Florida's defense to be any different Saturday. If some big plays and explosive plays start happening offensively, they get a little fire, get a little momentum, you never know how this thing can end.
So that aspect is true, that the Florida defense, even in the midst of the tough times for Billy Napier, because really ultimately, what did Napier get fired for? Napier got fired for unwillingness, or maybe it's an inability, but it's at least an unwillingness to want to relinquish control of the offense. Even last year, you'd say that was almost a condition of his continued employment that he give some offensive power over somebody else. That seemingly never happened. And so therefore, the offense never got better. You got to make a change at that point. That's basically why Billy Napier got fired, almost solely for what happened on that side of the ball. Now, over the years, they were sloppy on special teams and things like that too. But this year, at least, there's been very little to complain about when it comes to the Florida defense. And Georgia going into this game on Saturday, I think knows it's going to get a game effort when it comes from the other side. Gators defense actually probably going to be pretty good. In fact, Kirby Smart doesn't need Gene Chizik to tell him that. He himself has been talking about that too, obviously pointing out that there is a lot of SEC-style looking bodies on that Florida defense here right now, which presents a challenge for Georgia offense that suddenly seems to be figuring some stuff out. This is Kirby Smart on that same topic a little earlier this week.
Yeah, they're really talented, and they've had some injuries. You know, they've got some guys out. You can only imagine what this unit would look like if it had stayed healthy the entire year. But they are really good. They're big. They're physical. They got a great defensive coordinator who knows what he's doing. He understands where weaknesses are. He understands what you're trying to do. He has compliments for that. He's been really successful as a defensive coordinator everywhere he's been, and they do a great job of stopping the run, affecting the passer. Very dominant defensive team in terms of physicality and skill level.
So let's talk about the first part of what Smart mentions that Florida does well, the notion that they stop the run. And if you look at Georgia this season, a little bit of a mixed bag in terms of the results based on who it is that Georgia might be playing. This Georgia offense, both through the air and on the ground, essentially feasted against good teams with not great defenses. On the road at Tennessee back in September, against Ole Miss a couple of weeks ago. Those are good teams. Neither of them probably are known for having great defenses, and Georgia absolutely feasted on both of them. Now, against what we do think of as a pretty good defense in Alabama, Georgia still had more than 200 yards rushing that day. It was actually, statistically speaking, a pretty good day overall for Georgia offensively once everything kind of got off and running, which unfortunately, slow start, a little bit of an issue there. But once it got off and running, Georgia actually found a lot of success on the ground. It ran for more than 200 yards. So had that success against a good defensive running of Alabama. But in the game against Auburn just after that, in what was, once again, kind of the inverse of what we said a moment ago, Tennessee and Ole Miss are good teams with bad defenses. Auburn's probably a bad team that has a very good defense. On that particular day, Georgia did not have nearly the same success running the football. And the lack of success running the ball, I think, put the offense in a tough situation because, listen, being one-dimensional made it easier to stop the pass, and suddenly Georgia's not really having a very good day offensively against a very good Auburn defensive front. So you will think about that game going into this against Florida on Saturday. I don't think, and some of this, as Kirby said, relates to injury, but I don't think of the Florida defensive front quite as good as maybe I think of what Auburn brought to the table a couple of weeks ago, but it ain't bad, and it is a tough challenge here for Georgia. Now, the good news is, whether it be what Kirby Smart says about it there or what Georgia players are also saying, this is a challenge that Georgia is more than ready for. To go back to where I started the show, the notion that somehow Georgia, because it has a high number next to its name, a high ranking, and because it's 6-1 right now, flying high, well in the college football playoff race, the idea that it's looking past Florida or overlooking Florida or somehow overconfident against Florida, that's just not the way that it goes for a Kirby Smart program or in this current iteration of the SEC where so many games are close, especially for a game like this where it's a rivalry and you know that Florida is going to be throwing everything it can to be ready for Georgia. That's something we've talked about a lot this week. But Chauncey Bowens, who, by the way, this is a very personal game for Chauncey. He says when it comes to whatever the defense has from the Gators and whatever's going to be expected, that this Georgia rushing attack is ready to meet the moment and ready to succeed no matter what Florida throws at them defensively. This is what Chauncey Bowen said.
Yeah, I mean, we've acknowledged that, yeah, they have a really good personnel group. They're built really well on the D-line and all the way to the cornerbacks, linebackers, everything. And it's the same thing with their offense. They're a really good team, and we know that. And we know that they're built similar to us, so we're looking forward to playing them. But it's going to be a tough game for sure.
That's exactly the mindset that Georgia should have. It's the mindset you would expect Georgia to have. You're not surprised to hear that. Now, let me say two other things real quick, and we're going to talk about something different. Thing number one is this. I don't have time to play all this for you, but it is worth going and listening to. If you go to our DawgNation YouTube page, it's the easiest place to find it. You can see the full press conference that Chauncey Bowens did this week. Some of that was very interesting, where Bowens talked about his time as a former Florida commit and why this game means a little bit more to him and how proud he is. And this is the thing, if you're a Georgia fan like me, you really want to hear how proud he is that he made the decision to come to Georgia. It's really good. And it's interesting that a lot of the folks that Georgia put out for the media this week are guys that understand the history of Georgia-Florida. It's a guy like Jordan Hall, who's going back to what he thinks of his hometown. It's a guy like Chauncey Bowens, who's a former Florida commit. Even a guy like Drew Bobo, deep ties to the Georgia program, obviously a better understanding of the Georgia-Florida rivalry. The players that were picked to speak this week, in their own way, seem to have a way of speaking about this rivalry that's really meaningful. And Chauncey Bowens is very good on that. I'll invite you to check that out. I think it's worth your time. But before we kind of change off this topic, let me spin this in a little bit of a different direction here for a moment, because we've talked about this a lot, that I believe that Florida is dangerous on Saturday, and that I believe that the interim coach gives them a little bit of an element of surprise and the motivation of playing for a interim coach they probably like. There's a little bit of a template for interim coaches these days where it's always the most popular assistant. If you think about football coaches, sometimes you have the good cop, sometimes you have the bad cop. The bad cop is the hard grinding guy that's yelling at everybody. The good cop is the guy that comes behind and pats you on the back and tells you how good you're doing, the encourager. It's typically the good cop that gets the interim coaching job, and that's one of the reasons why there's a little bit of an inflation in performance, I would believe, when it comes to the popular assistant, the well-liked guy getting elevated. It's also maybe one of those reasons why over the course of the year, the benefit of the interim coach eventually fizzles out, because, after a while, you probably need a little bit of the other side of that motivational, the bad cop, hard grinding style. You probably need some more of that eventually. But either way, my guess is these guys are excited about playing for Gonzalez on Saturday. Seems like they like him. We think that there's a little bit of an element of surprise here that could present some challenges for Georgia. We've talked plenty about that by now. You're well briefed on that if you're a regular listener or viewer to the program. Let me instead flip this on the other side here for a moment. Let me talk about what Georgia can do if Georgia goes in fully aware to exploit this Florida defense that's going to be ready for it and ready to deal with whatever it is that Florida's throwing at them with DJ Lagway. Let me tell you what you could see from Georgia. You could see real significant evidence that Georgia is turning a corner on the season. Because quietly, let me tell you what's happening. And I don't know that we've properly appreciated this, because living through it, this doesn't feel true, but the numbers say that it is. If you go back and talk about the idea that, Florida could pull the upset against Georgia, well, you're obviously referencing back to a point spread. Florida is about a 7.5 point underdog, depending on where and when you've seen that this week. When you talk about the underdog, that's what you're talking about. Georgia is a point spread favorite. Let's think about point spreads for a moment, not from a gambling standpoint necessarily, but from the standpoint of a projected outcome for the game, setting an expectation for performance. Did you know, and honestly, you may not realize this because, as I said, the games don't quite feel this way, but this is what's true. Georgia's actually covered 3 straight games. If you live through the season, here's what it feels like. The Georgia went on the road against Tennessee, had the fight of its life, had to hold on like crazy, probably a little lucky, came out of there a winner, and oh my gosh, what a nail-biter that was. Then you get ready for Alabama, not meeting expectations, losing again to the Crimson Tide. Everybody's disappointed by that, and at that point, it felt like the season was kind of on the rails. And then you go through this stretch where, okay, well, Kentucky, that's a little bit easy. That's fine. But you forget about that because it's only Kentucky. And then it feels like against Auburn and Ole Miss, you were just fighting for your dadgum life. And you're lucky you didn't get blown out against Auburn because you're almost down 17-0. The Ole Miss game, you were down a couple of scores there too. They're getting anything they want on offense. And it feels like that you were just holding on for dear life, just trying to maintain. But in actuality, Georgia did beat Kentucky easily. And while, yes, Georgia was down 10-0 against, Auburn to begin the game, the truth is they were only a narrow favorite at Jordan-Hare Stadium, ended up winning the game far above the expectation for playing that game on the road. And against Ole Miss, while for the most part Georgia was not in control of that game whatsoever for the first three quarters, in the fourth quarter it outscored Ole Miss 17-0. So even if you don't gamble, and that is a choice you can make for yourself, when you think about the point spread as a projected outcome, an expectation, according to the data, according to the numbers on the page, Georgia's actually exceeded expectations 3 games in a row. Did not feel that way as we lived through them, but that's what it ultimately was. So let's say, just for fun, that Georgia did that again. Let's say with all these people like Gene Chizik on the SEC network saying, if you're not careful, Florida could upset you. Let's say that Georgia shrugs that off and wins this game by a couple of touchdowns, by 10 points, double-digit margin. We've told you before, about half the games in the SEC this season have been decided by single-digit points or less. If Georgia were in by double digits, a couple of scores, then all of a sudden you're talking about a Georgia team that now 4 games in a row has exceeded the expectations for it. That's maybe an example that Georgia's finding its footing as it heads through the stretch run in November. We believe that's an absolute possibility. There is one big figure that can help Georgia do just that. Who is it? We're going to talk more about that coming up in a moment, but first, let's take some time to introduce the show. My name is Brandon Adams, and this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented by Merriweather & Tharp. We're glad you're with us, and we're looking forward to the cocktail party. Can't wait to be there. If you're there, hope I run into you. We won't be there long. Got high school football on Friday. We'll leave very early Saturday morning, be there for the game, and hopefully for the celebration after that, because that's what we do. When you beat Florida, you live it up, and that's what Georgia fans are looking forward to here this weekend. I'll tell you some folks who know a lot about that. It's our friend Bob Tharp, his wife Ashley, their family from Merriweather and Tharp. They've been to a lot of cocktail parties over the years, lots of moments watching Georgia beating Florida. It's one of the things I love about our great sponsors is they are just as into all of this as so many of you are, and I'm proud of that. And I'm also proud of the service that Merriweather and Tharp can provide you, perhaps in a time of need. We always say that Merriweather and Tharp is your source for Georgia divorce. That Georgia aspect of this has never been more true, as the success that Merriweather and Tharp has enjoyed has allowed them to expand their reach all across the state of Georgia. They just have an office now in Columbus. So if you're thinking about Athens, Peachtree City, Carrollton, Savannah, Fayetteville, maybe there's offices all over. If you'll just check the website, it's georgiadivorceteam.com, georgiadivorceteam.com. You can find one near you. And it's important to understand that if you're going through the divorce process, the attorney in one of these offices, and of course it's still just as much in the Atlanta area as it ever was, their presence here just as strong as ever. These are attorneys that are embedded in these communities. That means they know the local courts, they know the judges, they know the specific language that sometimes exists within the various communities. And that institutional knowledge is something you can put to work for you. I wish you didn't have to get divorced. I really did. If I could wave a magic wand and take that away from you, of course I would. This really means a lot to me. There's nothing more important than family. But sometimes reality is just what it is. You have to play the hand that you've been dealt. And if that's your situation, then you got to do it wisely, and you got to do it smartly. And you got to have our friends at Merriweather and Tharp on your side to help you do that. Protect your finances. Think about your relationship with your children. Think about next steps and all kinds of things that you and I together would never even consider, but Merriweather and Tharp considers for a living. and knows about deeply because they've done this sort of thing thousands of times in the past. So if you've got questions, they've got answers. Find out online, GeorgiaDivorceTeam.com. GeorgiaDivorceTeam.com. Meriwether and Tharp is your source for Georgia divorce. All right, we got a busy show. It's Terrence Edwards coming up in a moment. I'm always excited about having him on the program. Also, special week to have Terrence after an experience that he and I got to share together this past weekend. We'll tell you more about that coming up in a minute, too. But before we do anything else, let me remind you, we've also got a big event coming up now, and I'm excited about this. We have not done one of these things in a while, and this is going to be, I think, as big a thing as we've done in a little while, at least here in the great state of Georgia. I'm talking about DawgNation on Tap. That's the name of the great event. It's going to take place Thursday, November 13th at the Terrapin Brewery in Athens. This is an awesome experience and a great chance for you to come out and see us. We'll do a live Q&A. We'll hang out. We'll talk some Georgia football, both in a formal on-stage way and an informal, just, like I said, just hanging out and talking football. It's a great experience. Our friends at Terrapin Beer want to give you your first beer that night on the house, complimentary. That's a really cool thing to do. And our friends at Cercheros heard about this. They said they want to be a part of it. They're bringing free food. Can you believe that? Free food, an event like this. And everyone's invited to attend. This is not a ticketed event. This is not a exclusive insider event. This is just for anybody who watches our show and a part of what we do here at DawgNation. We are going to ask you to do one thing, though. If you can go to DawgNation.com/on-tap. That's DawgNation.com/on-tap. We would like for you to RSVP. The reason why is we just got to have some knowledge of how much food to have and space to provide. We've got some special guests who are coming. That's going to be really cool too. So all of that's going to be a huge deal. But in order to be there, no ticket, no price to enter, nothing like that. But we are going to ask you to RSVP. Go to DawgNation.com/on-tap for more on that. DawgNation.com/on-tap. And oh yeah, by the way, one more very big thing as it relates to this. For the big game, that upcoming Saturday, you know the one I'm talking about, the Burnt Orange coming into town, the big one there. We're going to give away a pair of tickets to that game that night at DawgNation on Tap. So that's another reason why you want to be there. In addition to the DawgNation team, the special guests we're going to have on hand, the fun football talk, the delicious Terrapin beer, and some great food from Cercheros. Chance to win a pair of tickets to the big one that weekend. That is going to be an awesome experience because that is a very hot ticket right now, and you could win a pair at DawgNation on Tap. But you got to go to DawgNation.com/on-tap to RSVP to let us know you plan on coming to this very fun free event with DawgNation coming up on Thursday, November 13th. Now, with that said, let's get ready to go around the Dawghouse presented today by our friends at Daytona Beach. Okay, so to recap where we just were, I said a moment ago that I believe that, hey, for all the talk about upset, we've certainly done our part to, hey, be careful about Florida. We don't deny that. We've done our part to elevate some of that conversation too. But for all the talk of that, we actually believe that Saturday could be a big day for Georgia in what could be, and sometimes living through something, you don't realize what's happening until you look back over your shoulder and say, oh, look at that. I guess Georgia was actually coming together. Dominated Kentucky, controlled the second half against Auburn, completely annihilated Ole Miss in the fourth quarter. Maybe Florida is the next step towards a team that's figuring some stuff out and coming together. Maybe that's what it is. And if that next step does continue to be taken against these lousy, stinking Gators, we believe a Georgia player is very important in that step. We believe it's Gunnar Stockton. Now, we think this is true for a couple of reasons and beyond just, Gunnar's coming off a good game, quarterback the most important position. We think there are several reasons why this is perhaps true for Gunnar Stockton, maybe one big reason. But let me walk you through this. Let me go back to Gene Chizik, who a moment ago was saying, be careful of this Florida defense, be careful with them. But in the same conversation, also paid due deference to the fact that, you know what, right now, the way this Georgia offense is playing, especially coming off the Ole Miss game, the way that Gunnar Stockton is playing, this Georgia offense may be ready to carve up no matter what defense is on the other side from them. This is what Gene Chizik said on the SEC Network this week.
They held the ball, listen, this is hard to do now. They held the ball for 17 more minutes than Ole Miss, which is a recipe to win, right? You keep the ball away from an explosive offense like Ole Miss. So I think Georgia went in with a lot of momentum, But make no mistake about it, the part you brought up, Gunnar Stockton makes this thing go. They rushed for 230 yards. They threw for over 300 yards. So the bottom line is Georgia's kind of clicking on all cylinders going into this week off. So they don't have to do anything different. Just keep improving to where they left off 2 weeks ago.
It's funny how one game can change a narrative. You know, going into the Ole Miss game, I don't know that a lot of Georgia fans would have felt like Georgia had much in the way of momentum. And yet you score every time against the Rebels, and suddenly an objective analyst on TV is like, oh, man, Georgia just came in with so much momentum and then kept it going. So it's kind of funny how one game can change a lot of things as it relates to a narrative. But it is true. Georgia controlled the football, scored every single time, and probably needed to score every time to beat Ole Miss. And the performance of Gunnar Stockton is one of the things that made that possible. What if he maintains even some of that? Because honestly, I don't know this Georgia offense can be expected to play that well against every team that it faces the rest of the way. A, that's probably a lesser defense. B, Georgia was playing at home. This is at least a neutral site game. And, it's probably a better defense than what Ole Miss has. So I don't know the expectation is to match what you did, but what if you match some of that against Florida on Saturday? I agree with Gene Chizik and others who think, yeah, this could be a very big day for Georgia indeed. And it could be, as I mentioned a moment ago, an example of Georgia continuing to progress, to find its footing and be ready for the stretch run that's on its way for Georgia in November. And I want to pause on this for a moment. In discussing Gunnar Stockton, I think it's important to point out that quarterback play for Georgia against Florida historically has been incredibly important. And there's a lot of things in a rivalry game that can be described and pointed out as important. I don't deny that. But for both the good and sometimes the not so good and sometimes just in between, how the quarterback plays against Florida is just one of those things that everybody talks about. It's the kind of game where you can't help but feel the little bit of extra pressure because of the way the stadium's designed with half on one side, half on the other, because of all the guys wearing the same uniform that you wear who've gone through this before. You can't help but feel it. And to that end, one of the guys who's had in the Kirby Smart era one of the best performances against Florida in what was a very big game, top 10 matchup back in 2018. This week, I thought that Jake Fromm was very honest about the pressure that he felt going into that game to raise his level of performance for the team itself, trying to hold on after having won the SEC the previous year to maintain its team performance. They're coming off a loss. There was a backup quarterback in Justin Fields getting a lot of attention. And this week on our program, Jake Fromm, who thrived in the face of all of that, I thought he was really interesting while discussing it. This is Jake Fromm from Tuesday. Take a listen to this.
Yeah, a lot of pressure in that game, coming off that loss at LSU, right? We were trying to get back up on top of the mountain, right, from the 2017 season, and a lot of outside noise that week. Had Justin behind me. Everybody wanted to, see Justin get thrown in there, and for me, it was just kind of a quote unquote kind of pissed off week of practice. Yeah. And man, just trying to get back to playing good ball and executing, and had a good week of practice. And for me, the mindset was just to come in and cut it loose and kind of play with no regrets. And a really big game. I think it was a very pivotal game in our season and really in my career as well, of beating a really good football team in a much needed time of the season. And we were able to kind of propel off that win and into the later half of the year. But yeah, that was a big game and a very pivotal point, I think, of my career.
So I think that's a very honest description from Jake Fromm about what it can feel like on the inside trying to play in this game. We would say circumstances slightly different for Gunnar Stockton here right now, but some form of that same pressure, maintaining the performance he just had, for instance, he's got to be feeling some version of that. I mean, think back to Stetson Bennett here in 2021. At that point in time, the legend of Bennett hadn't quite been written yet. Bennett did not play well against Florida. Everybody was beside themselves, and they're all angry. That's the moment in which Nolan Smith comes out post-game and says, hey, y'all are ragging on my quarterback. This is my guy. I believe in the mailman. That's my quarterback. There was also a version of that with Carson Beck in 2023 and 2024. He openly acknowledged the importance in his mind of going back to his hometown. He thrived in that environment in 2023, did not have a good game here last year. That quarterback play in this Georgia-Florida game, for the good and the bad, is going to put you in the spotlight. But we're led to believe that while Gunnar feels that, and by the way, one of the things we'll talk more about tomorrow, because I just read this before the show began today, Gunnar told Mark Schlabach from ESPN.com about his own Georgia-Florida memories and an interesting story, sad story really, about his grandfather going back to a Georgia-Florida game in 2010 that he attended as a fan. And to give you an idea of how deep Gunnar's roots run for the Georgia-Florida game, so you better believe he's feeling this in a very big way. Told Mark Schlabach of ESPN.com that. We'll tell you more about that tomorrow on the show. So clearly this means a lot to him. But the question is, well, how do you keep from allowing it to mean too much? How do you keep from the pressure that Jake Fromm just described? How do you keep from allowing that pressure to overtake you? Well, I think one of the things that Gunnar Stockton does really well is the peripheral noise, the meaning of the next moment, all of the stuff that guys like me talk about. We'd be led to believe that Gunnar is so immersed in his process of trying to learn everything that needs to be learned to play the quarterback position well, that you might say, perhaps an oversimplification, but nonetheless, you might say he doesn't have time to think about anything else. And Drew Bobo, who obviously knows him well, the Georgia center working closely with him, talked this week about how we've seen Gunnar's decision-making in-game improve, and the arduous and rigorous workload that Gunnar takes on during the week to get ready for a game is one of the things that Drew Bobo says helps him. And as Gunnar stays involved in all of this, that doesn't give him much time to think about the high stakes of a rivalry game in Jacksonville. This is Drew Bobo describing Gunnar Stockton's work ethic.
I mean, yeah, he puts in a lot of time, work, and effort into just off-the-field stuff, like watching film, doing choosing plays he likes and stuff like that. And I just see him doing that and working so hard while we're watching film. He's in there writing stuff down on a piece of paper, what plays he likes, what he sees against this coverage. And I just think throughout the year he's gotten better and better at doing that. And just putting in work off the field and deciding what he's going to do on Saturdays, that's helped him be able to do that.
If you want to know why Gunnar's teammates seem to like him so much, it's that kind of work ethic that I think leads to that. He's tough on the field, of course. He's also playing well, too. But in addition to that, he's in there taking notes and writing stuff down and learning everything that he can learn, fully committed to the process. That brings the team together to rally around him, and it also helps keep your mind off of what is obviously a big stage, big spotlight, and a big opportunity to perform. Thus far, as the stage and spotlight has gotten bigger, Gunnar seems to be getting better and better, and Kirby Smart also talked this week about that process continuing, that improvement in Gunnar remaining ongoing. Here's Kirby again.
Yeah, I want to see him continue to grow, take what the defense gives him, understand what we're trying to do. We give Gunnar a lot of latitude and options in terms of the play call. It's more about putting us in the right play to be successful based on what they're in defensively. And I don't think he gets enough credit for that decision-making process. You know, every play might have 2 to 3 decisions he has to make, and those 2 to 3 decisions sometimes determine the outcome of that play. And really proud of his growth. He's got to keep doing it and keep taking care of the ball. And when he does that, then you know we're a good football team.
I don't expect Georgia to score on every possession against Florida, nor do I think it needs to win. But I would like to see Georgia maintain some of the offensive success they put on display against Ole Miss. And if it does, then to use a phrase we used a couple times now, then maybe that really is evidence of Georgia turning a corner. And in this game, when you think about the role that quarterbacks have played, for the good, the not so good, and everything else in between, hard to imagine a game on Saturday in which Gunnar Stockton doesn't play a gigantic role. And if he plays even close to the way that he played against Ole Miss, for Georgia fans, that could prove to be a very good thing. And that is Around the Dawghouse, presented today by our friends at Daytona Beach. Obviously, we love going to the cocktail party because we love the Atlantic coast of Florida. And speaking of the Atlantic coast, just down the road from there, in fact, many of you may be enjoying Daytona Beach for your cocktail party weekend, is Daytona Beach right there. A1A just runs right through it, and it's an awesome place. I told you earlier this week, I grew up going to Daytona Beach. I love it. And I want you to think about, for late fall, heading into the winter, early 2026, a great chance to get some great savings on a great beach vacation, because trust me, you need one. I'm a big believer in travel. I just love travel. Y'all know I love going to the beach. You know I love getting a tan. I feel like I'm a little pale right now. I'm hoping to get some sun this weekend if I can. I'm just all about all of that. Our friends at Daytona Beach want to help you have that experience. They let you enjoy some good food. You can fly there, international airport. It's super convenient. Just a great experience. So check out DaytonaBeach.com/hotel deals for more on that. It's DaytonaBeach.com/hotel deals for more on that today. Great to have Daytona Beach as a part of Around the Dawghouse. Great to have you. Great to have Terrence Edwards as well. We'll talk to Terrence about Georgia-Florida, but also great weekend this past weekend as we watch Terrence's brother Robert and some other terrific Dogs, former Dogs, going to the Georgia High School Football Hall of Fame. Let's talk about that and more with Terrence Edwards here right now on DawgNation Daily, presented by Merriweather and Tharp.
From Athens and across the SEC or wherever the recruiting trail may lead, here's a DawgNation.com insider.
Terrence, we've obviously got a lot to talk about when it comes to the Georgia-Florida game coming up on Saturday. I know that game means a lot to you, as it does to all of the former Georgia players. But speaking of former Georgia players, prior to that, we got to go back and look at this past weekend. What a great celebration that was with the most recent class, the Georgia High School Football Hall of Fame. I had a chance to talk to your brother Robert a good bit that night. We had a chance to watch him put his blue jacket on, being enshrined for a great career, much like yours there at Washington County. In fact, I think we have a picture we can show of you guys together there. I was just so thrilled by all of that. Thanks for being there, first of all, to help represent you as a part of the inaugural class that goes in there. You guys look great in your blue coats. That's an awesome thing to see. Thank you so much for being there. I really appreciate that. And just thanks for helping us make new memories as Robert goes in. What did the night mean to you?
It was an awesome night. It's not for me, but for my family. My father and mother was there, so now they have two boys in the Georgia High School Hall of Fame. And I was really excited to see Robert go in. And when I tell you, I can remember like it's yesterday. I was in the 7th grade when Robert was a senior in high school. And that was some of the best times of my life, just watching him play on those Friday nights in a house of pain. I've never seen anything like it. When he was never came off the field, was the punter, the kicker, quarterback, receiver, linebacker, DB, wherever he needed to be. That's what Coach Tomlin put him at. So it was just great thing for Robert, and a great memory for my family.
I do love that about Georgia high school football, when you've got the Robert Edwards level player, and of course you were a similar player too, but when you've got the Robert Edwards level player, he's just your best everything. He'd be your best long snapper. He'd be your best kicker. He'd play quarterback. He'd play linebacker. You know, like, you have these guys that, I mean, it really is like the everybody's All-American punt, pass, and kick. Like, whatever you need him to do, he would, you can only use him one place at a time, but whatever job you need guys like that in, they're just going to be the best guy on the field no matter what.
Right. And he was the best guy every night. His senior years kind of kicked off the golden era for Washington County. They went 14-1 that year, lost to Mitchell Baker in the state finals. So that was kind of the introduction of the success of Washington County. Robert was a big part of that. And just watching him play, and I can remember like yesterday, Brandon Tolbert tweeted out something about Robert, and I remember that catch down the sideline in overtime to beat Villarica in penetration. I know a lot of people don't know what penetration is these days because we don't play penetration in high school ball anymore. But he had a catch down the sideline to seal that game. I think it was 22-21, and that was one of the moments that I can remember vividly, that you just throw him up, throw the ball up, or put Robert in any situation in high school. And 9 times out of 10, he was going to come down with that play.
And of course, we've told this story before, but I'll tell it again briefly. So you go to Georgia, he goes to Georgia, defensive back for a couple of years. Then 1995, they're going to shift to running back. And in his first game, had 5 touchdowns. I mean, Georgia's had a lot of very good running backs, and so some of these feats sometimes don't get the proper appreciation I believe they deserve, and I do believe that Robert is among the more underrated backs that Georgia's probably had. 5 touchdowns in his debut. That set a record. It's such a cliche, the notion of, well, imagine how good he would have been if he had not, torn up his knee, gotten injured. In the case of Robert, though, this is the most true thing ever. He was a first-round pick and had a great rookie season with the New England Patriots. And it's obviously, for folks we have so many young folks that don't know about this kind of thing, terrible injury involving the Pro Bowl and like a beach volley, like a two-hand touch or flag football game on the sand, tears up his leg, was never the same again. And I know people have seen that in movies. That's such a cliche. In this case, though, this really was a first-round pick who had an awesome rookie season and was really never the same again. I'm glad for things like the Georgia High School Football Hall of Fame because I do think it gives more attention to careers that younger generations of fans are just not going to be as aware of, but I certainly think, Terrence, they should be.
I think so. I mean, it was 1998 Pro Bowl with the likes of Peyton Manning, Charles Woodson, Randy Moss was all in the beach flag football game, and he just went up to knock a pass down and landed wrong and did some horrendous things to his knee. And you're right, he wasn't the same player that he was before that. And I think if he do not get injured, I think he's on course to be, maybe a Hall of Famer. I mean, you just never know what can happen. But as a rookie, almost 1,200 yards rushing, I still think he owns a record for the most rushing touchdowns to start off a career or something like that. But he was, he was setting himself up to be, put his name in the likes of the greats. And it was sad to see. But one thing about Robert that's a little different that people don't know about, like he's been the person always like, if it had to happen, it had to happen to the right person. Me, I don't know if I've been as strong as him
Interesting.
and determination to come back and do the things that he has done. And thank God has put him in the right place to be a head football coach and mentor kids and have his story to be told, that how you can be on cloud nine at the top of the mountain one day and it can be all taken away from you. So what you going to do about it? How you going to handle yourself? So I just think he just have a great story to tell. And I just wish if somebody out there looking to write a script, and we're going to make a movie out of his life because he has a story to tell.
Well, let me ask you this before we move on. You mentioned your parents there on Saturday for the Georgia High School Football Hall of Fame event. They must be incredibly proud. You are a head coach now in Mount Vernon. He's a head coach back at his alma mater of Washington County. Of course, he's had a couple of stops as head coach along the way, but now back home at Waco. What do they think about their two boys now being head coaches here in Georgia? They must be incredibly proud of that.
They love it. My parents get opportunity to go watch all of Robert home games, and when Robert is on the road and I have a home game, my parents are here. So this past week, it just worked out perfect. Robert played in Macon, and they share a stadium in Macon, so they had to play on Thursday, which my father went to. Then they rolled up here on Friday, him and my mom, to watch my game, and stayed at my house the whole weekend because of Robert's induction.
nice.
So I got opportunity to, you know, mom cooked breakfast, dad grilled
Ooh.
on my green eggs. So
Ooh.
just got opportunity to just be with them for a whole weekend that I haven't had opportunity to do in a long time. And my kids see them, but not a lot. So they got opportunity to spend the whole weekend with their grandparents. So it was just a great weekend for the Edwards family.
I love that. That's so nice to hear. So I said a moment ago, when it comes to the Georgia-Florida game on Saturday, I don't certainly expect Georgia to score every time it touches it the way that it did against Ole Miss. But boy, I sure would like to keep some of that offensive firepower going here through the off week and against these Gators there on Saturday. Terrence, how does Georgia maintain some of what it did have going against Ole Miss, a game in which everything was working? How do you keep some of that going against the Florida defense that I would say is probably better than what the Rebels showed you 2 weeks ago?
Yes, you just got to continue to play consistent, and that doesn't mean that you have to score on every possession. But we're looking for high execution. High execution, that means everybody doing their job to the utmost of their ability, and that doesn't necessarily score on all six possessions. But they're just going to give our offense the confidence that, hey, we can move the ball, we can run the ball, we can throw the ball, we can do anything that we want to do and every possession won't end up in points, but it still give you confidence that we can make the adjustments. Bobo can call the right plays. Garner could execute those plays along with the whole offense. I'm just looking for the team to just continue that momentum, and that momentum could be 28 to 32 points. That's the type of momentum that I'm looking for.
And then speaking of momentum, if you look only at the fourth quarter against Ole Miss, Georgia defense was pretty close to perfect too. Didn't allow any points. What is it? It's fewer than 20 yards total or something like that. It's a really stern showing from the defense. How do you think they can maintain some of that? Because clearly, I've just been operating on the assumption all week long they're going to try to do something to exploit. That's why you promote the quarterbacks coach. That's why you fire Napier. You're going to try to make DJ Lagway comfortable. Georgia's been vulnerable to begin games. Is there any way to prevent that from happening against Florida on Saturday, you think?
Yes, and that's the biggest thing that I'm looking at. I'm not necessarily, the offense is not my issue right now. My issue is just getting the defense to start fast. We always talk about the offense starting fast and not having those lows. Now we got to be able to get the defense out off the field. The defense got to be able to not allow a team to go down on the first possession and score on every game. So I'm looking at the defense right now, see if we can start off fast and get a 3 and out in the first possession, or not allow points on that first possession, and see if we could get some semblance of a pass rush. And just being a head coach now, and it don't have to be a sack. Pressure. As long as we're getting pressure and being able to get DJ Lagway off his spot, being able to make him comfortable. That's what I'm going to be looking for. And when we are able to generate pressure, that's when you see the best of this defense. And I think that's what happened in the fourth quarter versus Ole Miss, was able to finally get pressure. And I'm just looking for the front seven just to play faster, play with more confidence, and just play and be more physical at the point of attack.
Let me finish with this, if you don't mind. We played a clip earlier of Chauncey Bowens as a former Florida commit talking about, this game, and he admitted, listen, as a former, guy who's committed to the Gators, the game has maybe a little extra meaning. He says he's obviously thrilled with the choice that he made, and it's what this rivalry feels like it has. Georgia's got a lot of Floridians on its roster. Florida's going to have some Georgia players in its roster. When you played, the same thing would have been true. Maybe in your era, a little bit more of an overlap with maybe kind of Auburn or something like that. It seems like they were a big factor in state back then, but how does the close ties, the geographic proximity, how does that impact these rivalry games where you look across the other side and you say, yeah, I know this guy, I went to camp with that guy or whatever else? It seems like the intimate knowledge these players have with each other make these rivalry games even more intense. How did that impact the rivalry games you played in?
It definitely impact more with Auburn and Georgia Tech, since Georgia Tech is an in-state rival, but Auburn definitely had their fair share of Georgia players on their team. And for me, the Florida game, I have a player that I coach at Milton, Bryce Thornton. He is the son of Bruce Thornton that
Sure.
played with me at Georgia. So that's a little rivalry that we have going on, right? So you see the crossover a lot right now, especially with a lot of players, kids now that are playing college football, that you can see that they're playing at your rival school. So being able to coach Bryce and being able to play with Bruce, that's a little family rivalry that they have going on. And for me as his coach who coached him, I'm always, looking to beat him, but I'm also looking for him to play well.
That's awesome to hear. Terrence, great stuff. And by the way, speaking of guys you've coached and the personal work you're doing right now, if people want to get in touch with the Terrence Edwards Wide Receiver Academy and get some more of that training that you've been very well known for a long time, how can they connect with the Terrence Edwards Wide Receiver Academy?
Yes, you can find me on all social media platforms at Terrence Edwards Wide Receiver Academy.
Terrence, I appreciate your time. It's always great to talk football with you. Hope you enjoy the game this weekend. And we'll look forward to seeing you very soon. And thanks for being here on DawgNation Daily, presented by Merriweather and Tharp today.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Let's take a look around the rest of the league. This is SEC Through.
All right, we're going to do our SEC Through here in a moment. I got to tell you something really big before we get there, though. Some folks hear me talk about a lot here on our show, Pella Window and Door. They have got a big thing going on right now that you need to act fast to take advantage of. Big game to end the regular season, Mercedes-Benz Stadium, the one that's often known as clean old-fashioned hate. There's a big ticket giveaway courtesy of Pella Window in Door of Georgia for the game Georgia against Georgia Tech coming up. It's obviously Black Friday afternoon. That's November 29th. But here's how you get your chance to win tickets to the big one in Atlanta to end the season here. You just got to book your in-home consultation, your appointment with one of the Pella experts to talk about the Pella windows that we tell you about each week here on DawgNation Daily. Pella's a longtime supporter of ours. We've been in a partnership with them forever. I love what they do for our folks when it comes to, making your home feel better on the inside, looking better on the outside, the energy-efficient windows that they're famous for. I'm telling you, it's a great product that's going to make your home better. But for right now, it's an even better situation for you because when you book that appointment with Pella between now and November 14th, you can be registered for your chance to win a pair of tickets to Georgia Tech at the end of the season. And guess what? These aren't just any tickets. This is a suite. You'll be inside the suite, food, beverage. This is a luxury first-class experience for this game, courtesy of our friends at Pella. I think of Pella as a luxury product. The windows are so gorgeous. So, of course, if they're doing a game day giveaway, it's going to be a luxurious experience in a suite, Mercedes-Benz Stadium. And if you've never been in one of those suites, that's a real live suite, man. They are really, really nice. So you got to get ready to do all of this here right now. So if you go to PellaGA.com/Dawgs, you can find out all the information you need. That's PellaGA.com/Dawgs, DAWGS. You can find out everything you need to know on that. Great stuff with our friends from Pella Window. Pair of tickets to Georgia Tech being given away. Your chance to win. But you got to get that appointment booked between now and November 14th for more on that. So go to PellaGA.com/Dawgs for more details on that. All right, that said, let's get ready to do an SEC through here for a moment. And boy, oh boy, it certainly appears that the SEC coaching searches are getting wilder. The one at LSU in particular. In fact, let's talk about that. Governor Landry from Louisiana stepping out yesterday in a press conference saying that under no uncertain terms will Scott Woodward, the current LSU athletic director, be in charge of hiring the next LSU coach. A lot of people interpret that to mean that Landry himself is going to hire the next coach. Landry later clarified that he's not going to be the one that does it. He just doesn't think that Woodward is going to be the guy that does this. And obviously one of the criticisms he had of Woodward, both at LSU and going back to his time at Texas A&M, failed coaching searches that have resulted in disappointing outcomes for the coach that was hired and then gigantic buyouts paid to that coach. We're not as worried about buyouts around here. We think a lot of that's probably just a little bit overblown. But nonetheless, that was one of the issues that Landry cited while talking about Woodward, the issue with hiring the famous coach, which, listen, that's always been Woodward's MO. He hires a famous coach for all jobs, pays big dollars for him. Sometimes you swing for the fences and you might miss. I don't have a problem with the Woodward philosophy overall, but the results have not been good. A lot of people thought it was really controversial that Landry, the governor, stepped in on this and basically said the AD is not going to make the hire. I think there are a few things here that make this not quite as controversial as, look, on issues like this, the media always marches in lockstep. That's the one thing you can count on. There is an echo chamber of once you've heard one traditional sports writer opinion on a topic like this, you can pretty much, Xerox that and hear the same thing 10,000 times. It's just the way that goes. But the reason why I don't believe Landry's involvement here is as controversial as maybe some are treating it as for a couple of reasons. Reason number one is this. LSU does not have a university president right now. And so, therefore, someone has to speak as a voice on this, and it probably does not deserve to be what might be the embattled athletic director after another coaching hire has failed. The same thing we're going to say about Scott Strickland at Florida, a school that also doesn't have a university president. You may say about Woodward at LSU. There aren't very many athletic directors that get to hire 3 football coaches. That's just one of those things that you don't typically get to do because that means whatever you're using as your criteria for picking is not quite working out if you have to hire that many in a short period of time. So Woodward's time at LSU may very well be done. And with an embattled athletic director, no president, somebody has to speak as a voice for the state university, even though the athletic department operates, for the most part, financially separate from the university. It's still affiliated with the state university. So the governor speaking on behalf of the flagship university in the state does not seem all that weird to me. Here's the other thing. I mean, sometimes I think, and I understand where this comes from, sometimes I think people have such a low impression or a low opinion of the idea that a statewide elected official ought to be working to make the people in his state, their lives better. And Louisiana State University football, when it's good, everybody in Louisiana seems to benefit from that. Certainly plenty of businesses do. The economy in many respects rests on the back of these football teams and how they play. So the idea that Landry says, I am going to provide some accountability of this process and let you judge me for how well I manage this, that just seems like a pretty reasonable thing for me overall. I'll also say one more thing finally about this, which is that, look, when it comes to coaching hires to begin with, most of this is a big-time power struggle anyway. That we look at the athletic director as the guy who makes the hire, but oftentimes in some of these situations around the SEC, the athletic director is just a well-paid front for the behind-the-scenes backroom dealing that goes on that results in who gets these jobs. You're not going to hire a football coach in the SEC without the cliche of the smoke-filled room in which very powerful people roll up their sleeves and have their say about who ought to be hired. All we're really seeing in the case of the LSU situation here is some of that playing out publicly. The governor says, athletic director is not going to be the one that has the final say on this. The insinuation is it'll be the governor's handpicked. They don't quite call it board of trustees, I don't think, in Louisiana, but it's essentially the board of trustees. It's going to be them who have a big say on this. I picked all of them, so in a roundabout way, it's going to be me having some influence on this too. But y'all, that's the way that every coaching search goes anyway, whether it be the governor or not. Very powerful people are going to have their back channel conversations. Wouldn't you rather this play out publicly than the anonymity that normally describes some of these things? I would say that I probably would. I also thought it was funny that Georgia Governor Brian Kemp retweeted all of this and said, I'm just going to take some time to show some appreciation for Kirby Smart, essentially chuckling at the messy situation there in Louisiana. But while it's messy, I don't think this rises to the level of a scandal. I think the governor ought to take care of his constituents. His constituents want a good coach at LSU, and he's trying to help get one. I don't think that's such a bad thing necessarily. Speaking of controversy and scandal, shifting gears to something completely different, I saw where our friends at On 3, Pete Nakos is the writer, and boy, Nakos had some interesting stuff as of late. But nonetheless, had their list of the most controversial calls in the season thus far this year. Now, this is not an article you have to write. If you do write it, you write it for a reason. And I think when you look at what it is, it's a fairly obvious device. The article is presented one way, but then when you read it, okay, the takeaway is supposed to be, oh my gosh, the three most controversial calls of the season have all gone against Auburn. By the way, on video, we use a screen to preview the topic. That is a very funny picture of Hugh Freeze we're choosing to use right now. I would say well done to Cody and everybody that put that together for us today. That's very well done. But the point is like the whole purpose of the story is to once again fan the flames of hysteria around Auburn getting jobbed by the officials. Oklahoma game, supposedly by Georgia, even though the actual facts on the ground don't support that, because the number one call that was supposedly so terrible was the Jackson-Arnold fumble going into the halftime for Auburn against Georgia, but that's now been reviewed unofficially on the internet by analysts and experts and officially by the SEC, we're told, based on reporting, and it was not ruled to be a bad call. It just wasn't. Auburn fans want to hold on to that. Media wants to serve that hysteria, but the facts are what they are. That was not a bad call. The timeout thing, we've said before, yeah, it probably looks like Kirby Smart was calling timeout. Officials didn't handle that probably correctly, but ultimately it would have been better had they punished Kirby in the moment for that, as opposed to what actually happened, a phantom blocking the back penalty that took Georgia completely out of any chance to actually convert on the drive. That it actually worked out worse for Georgia the way that the timeout call was actually handled. One of the reasons why the referee was probably suspended, because the Athletic reported of the 9 controversial calls in that game that were decided to have been incorrectly adjudicated, 4 of those went against Georgia. So We think the on-3 claims here are probably pretty specious overall, but nonetheless, here's my reason for bringing this up. Let me give you something to watch for, and you can chuckle to yourself when you see this play out. The Auburn fans are using this stuff right now as a way of saying how bad Auburn was treated and this is so unfair. The SEC, for whatever reason, is out to get Auburn in their minds. That Auburn fans are all about this right now. But watch how this narrative is going to shift. And the same evidence eventually will be used completely different, because the notion that Auburn was on the wrong end of some bad officiating and the athletic director is beside himself and he's writing strongly worded letters and all the other stuff that's going on, eventually, and Auburn fans, if you're not smart enough to figure this out, I don't know how to help you. Eventually, this is going to be used as an excuse to keep Hugh Freeze as your coach, especially in light of Florida's already doing a coaching search and LSU's already doing a coaching search. Arkansas is looking for its next coach. Auburn doesn't want to be the fourth man into the fire in a crowded coaching search, coaching hiring cycle like that. So they are probably looking for any excuse they can get to keep Hugh Freeze as their coach. And if they win even a little bit more, that becomes a little bit more palatable. And when they do, Auburn fans are going to be beside themselves. And at that point in time, Auburn fans are going to shift their argument. And suddenly, instead of arguing, oh, we were jobbed by the officials, suddenly it's going to be, you can't use those officiating calls as an excuse to keep Hugh Freeze as the coach because we still lost the game anyway, and we should have overcome the bad calls. What the objective-minded people are telling Auburn now, Auburn fans themselves will eventually be saying once those bad calls that exist in their mind are used as an excuse to keep Hugh Freeze. When that happens, you can chuckle along, but as sure as I'm speaking to you right now, eventually that's going to happen. I'll finish with this. A game we're really excited about on Saturday is Vanderbilt going to Auburn. What a fascinating game this is. Vanderbilt coming off its win against Missouri, and frankly, a real live playoff contender. Vandy's been very good on the road, for instance. They were competitive against Alabama, even the one game they lost, and they won a bunch of road games last season. Vanderbilt is for real, for everything we can tell. Great quarterback play from Diego Pavia, a legitimate Heisman contender, and the average age of their players seems to be about 31 years old. This is a veteran team that's playing like it at the moment. At Texas, though, is a tricky proposition. However, one of the things that makes the game a little tricky for the Longhorns on Saturday is the fact that Arch Manning, we're told, has been in concussion protocol going back to last week's game against Mississippi State, and there is a chance that Manning might not play on Saturday. He is listed as questionable. There's also a belief that the backup quarterback, who probably played better than Manning did, that Texas may be in better hands with him. And for all I know, maybe that's right. I have a sneaking suspicion, though, that Arch will make his way through the concussion protocol, probably will play. And I believe that if I had to guess, Steve Sarkisian probably wants him to play. I think that Texas is going to win this game on Saturday. I think that Texas knows it's going to win this game on Saturday. I think deep down Vanderbilt knows it's going to win this game on Saturday. I don't think you pump up all the Jared Curtis visit stuff and wouldn't it be great if Clark Lee got a contract extension on the heels of that visit? I don't think you do all of that if you think the following week you're also winning at Texas, because that's the only argument you need for your program at that point. So I think this is likely to be a Texas win on Saturday. And think about Steve Sarkisian. What was the one knock on Sarkisian a year ago? It was that he was probably too loyal to his quarterback, Quinn Ewers. Now, I have a suspicion that loyalty to Ewers was not a one-time thing for that one particular player, although Ewers was deeply entrenched in Texas. I think that Steve Sarkisian, as a former quarterback himself, is probably loyal to his quarterbacks. And I don't think he wants a situation where he runs the risk of losing his locker room and have the backup quarterback lead Texas to a win against what is right now a top 10 opponent in Vanderbilt. If that's what's coming for Texas, I think that Sarkisian is very mindful of the locker room dynamic of, well, if the backup quarterback leads you to that win, if he plays well in doing so, then maybe this is just his team now, and all of a sudden, what does that mean for Arch Manning, who Texas is likely paying a lot of money to? I think that Sarkisian, maybe to a fault, but nonetheless, to a degree, has some insight into these kinds of dynamics. I think he wants to be loyal to Arch Manning. I think he wants to give Manning a chance to win this game. So my prediction is Manning will play. My prediction is Texas will win, and Texas will maintain its status as a playoff contender coming towards that matchup with Georgia later on in November. For now, we'll make that your SEC through. And before we get ready to wrap up things here today, let me also give you a shout out for a moment for our friends at the Georgia Spa Company. I think this is just such an awesome thing that for people who love being at home, and it seems like these days it's just comfortable being at home. It's the place you feel the best at. You're relaxed there. And one of the things I love, especially when you walk around, you see some of these houses in your neighborhood, stuff like that. A lot of people have almost kind of designed their home like it's their own personal resort, which I think is great. And I think one of the best ways to do that is with one of the tremendous products that are offered by our friends at Georgia Spa Company. If you want to take your backyard, your living space to the next level, Georgia Spa Company is a great way to do that. They work with so many different brands that's going to be perfect for you, this situation you need, whether it's a hot spring spa, a Caldera spa, endless pools, Tylo saunas, so much more. You want the sauna, you want the, when you talk about the endless pool, that's one of those things that's like your own personal lap pool that you can swim in. Obviously, you know what the spa looks like when you're kind of resting in that hot tub. Just an incredibly comfortable experience that you're going to enjoy over and over again. It's great for your kids and then eventually your grandkids. It's just a great thing to make your home the place to be, which is exactly what you want. And the friendly and expert staff from Georgia Spa Company going to make sure you get this perfect spa solution for you. They call it a spa guru, someone who's going to be dispatched to your home to look at your space and figure out exactly what you need for all of that. So that's what they're all about. They've served 35,000 customers. They've got more than 4,500 five-star reviews. So you're talking about a really cool thing with our friends at Georgia Spa Company. So they got 7 locations across North Georgia. You need to find one. Also check out georgiaspacompany.com for more details. That is georgiaspacompany.com for more details. We love the great stuff that Georgia Spa Company is doing for folks in our audience, and we think you need to be the next one to get one of these great 5-star experiences from them. And as we wrap up today, Golden Shoe, getting ready for the cocktail party on Saturday. Obviously, you better believe we have got cocktail party themed golden shoes today, including coming one right here. We'll show it to you on the screen here from our guy Robin, who has been very good with some of the AI style graphics, but he's also kind of gotten the old school touch with these. He's got the UGA-Florida there on the right that almost looks like it could be one of those classic game programs. And then on the left, the Florida style magician saying, beware of slick tricks that won't work. We've said before that we think that Florida's going to try to pull a trick and element of surprise on Georgia. Robin warning them that won't work. That's a great graphic too. He says it looks like another classic, but dogs won't be fooled by any trickery. We certainly agree with that. And that, Robin, that's why we're going to give you a golden shoe here today. Lousy, stinking Gators. Boy, we're ready for it. We've been doing this Gatorade Updater for a long time. It now stands at 1,818 days. We love to see that keep climbing. We need another win on Saturday if that be the case. So we're going to be rooting for that to happen. And we'll talk to you more about it tomorrow. DawgNation Daily, presented by our friends at Meriwether and Tharp. We will look forward to talking to you then. And on video, time now for the R.S. Andrews Cool Down. R.S. Andrews, the one you turn to for your air conditioning, heating, plumbing, electric needs. They show up on time. They do the work that's promised. The price is promised. You can trust them on that today. Okay, confession time for a moment. I got to go to a meeting today. I don't do a lot of meetings, but I do have to do one today. So we got to be very fast with the comments. I'll try to give you a longer period of comments tomorrow. But we're going to bounce through them quick here today. Only a couple of minutes because I've got to go to a meeting. Represent DawgNation in a meeting here in a moment. So let's take a couple of comments and we'll get out of here after that. All right, on DawgNation.com for a minute. Let's see what's going on here. Senior Dog 54 says Auburn never learns. No, it seems like they're hiring a coach every couple of years. But I believe they may get stuck with Hugh Freeze. And as I said, some of the stuff that Auburn fans are using to argue against their hated rivals right now, they may turn right around and make the opposite argument when it comes to these so-called bad calls being an excuse to keep Hugh Freeze later on. SEM Dog says if Freeze beats Alabama, he'll be back. They don't fire coaches after winning that game. I've been thinking about Alabama a little bit last couple of days. They've obviously been playing very well, winning games anyway, 4 straight ranked opponents, and then thrilling comeback against South Carolina. I don't know, man. It kind of makes you wonder if Alabama doesn't have another loss in them before the season's done. You know, they were outgained by Tennessee. Were they outgained by Georgia? Georgia certainly put up a pretty big offensive total that day. They lost to Florida State. I'm starting to wonder if there may not be another loss somewhere along the way for Alabama before it's all said and done.
Georgia 357 yards. Alabama outgained them 397.
Okay, so Bama did it. Thank you. Thank you very much, Cody. So Bama did outgain them, but it's fairly close. Fairly close. Well, let me go to YouTube here for a moment. Aaron Brown says he's got a picture of pina colada spiked with Long Island iced tea, chilling for the game. So it sounds like our guy Aaron's getting ready for the cocktail party. And Aaron, I hope you enjoy that. That's awesome. That's awesome. Let's see what else. Alan Hampton says, beware of the wounded animal. My dog's going to be at their best, and they will. Dogs by 20. Boy, I tell you what, we're going to be tough to take on this show Monday morning if Georgia wins this game by 20 points. I do like that. Foster Moss says he does not see Alabama losing again. I don't know. This is a fairly new opinion for me because I've been relatively high on Alabama, but it is something I've been thinking a little bit about lately. Go ahead and look at the Tennessee game, for instance. They won the game by 17 points. But boy, a lot of that's the 14-point swing of the pick six. The actual numbers that day, Tennessee had more first downs, more passing yards, more rushing yards, more total yards. I just think it's interesting. I think it's interesting, and I think it's maybe worth considering that some of the performances in game for Alabama are suggesting that there could be some trouble before it's all said and done. I'm also going to try to get some Facebook comments here in a moment. Elite GB has got Georgia winning 31-14. Boy, I'd like that too. James Ansari says that Bama could have lost to Vandy, Tennessee, and Georgia just as well. You could probably throw South Carolina into that for sure too. I'd say South Carolina definitely belongs in that. Let's see what else. Let me see what else is going on here. Tyler Puglisi asks if I'm dressing up for Halloween. No, I'm not much of a dress-up guy. I'm also doing high school football tomorrow too, so I'm trying to figure out what my family's doing. It seems like they've got big plans, but I'll be on Atlanta News First Friday night doing Milton and Roswell. So very excited about that. So no costume for me. Wyatt Fielden says Noah deserves a golden shoe. What do you think? I didn't see that. Wyatt, can you share it with me? What was that? I didn't see that. Share that with me because I didn't see it. G. Gray says Texas beating Vandy and Austin. Yeah, I do too. I think Texas wins that game. I think he wins that game. Chris says that Auburn fans are eating up the Pete Nako's article, even though Nako's placed both sides in the message board saying he meant refs should have given Georgia the touchdown. Did he really say that? That's interesting. Yeah, he said an interesting few days. Is Noah like a troll fan? Is that what that is? Oh, it's Noah Sheldon. Okay. I feel like we hadn't seen Noah in a while. It feels like we hadn't seen him in a while. I'm trying to get the Facebook comments over here. I may have to wait until Facebook tomorrow. Let me go back to DawgNation.com for a moment. Jeremy Smith says Kirby's average score when beating the Gators is by 21 points. That's probably true. That's a little bit higher than I thought it would be. A lot of that's, though, going to be impacted by winning by nearly 40 in 2017. Good bit of margin in 2018. a little closer in 2019. Remember, that was the thing that Dan Mullen was all about. Is like, last year in 2019, he said, last year we lost by 18, 19 points. This year we lost by 7. So he thought, boy, that was a big deal for him. He felt like he was closing the gap by keeping the game that close. You may remember him saying that. Since then, though, it feels like the games have been a little closer, haven't they? I mean, I think Kirby against the spread's only like 5-4 for his totality. So, yeah, I mean, 21, I guess you're right. But, boy, it seems like the games mostly have been closer than that. Randy Hall getting ready to fly to Columbia. Randy works in the aviation field. Ken Holcomb also thinks that Hugh Freeze may keep his job at Auburn. Yeah, I think they want to keep him because they don't want to compete for a coach right now. And I think in, a roundabout way, they'll try to use the officiating stuff as an excuse for that. It's maybe one of the reasons why Cohen, the athletic director, was so front and center on that. UGA Marine also says when it comes to the game, he says, hey, win by 1, win by 100, just win, which obviously we do agree with, of course. And yet I'll also add that if you're interested in seeing Georgia as a team take the next step and go from being a team that's right now seems fairly likely to make the college football playoff, at least I would, if I'm predicting, to make the college football playoff, the one that actually could win the national championship. National champions blow teams out. And it's great to win, and I'm thankful for any win that Georgia gets, however it comes. But if you want the kinds of outcomes that are predictive of a national championship, Georgia will probably start, if that's the kind of team that Georgia's on its way to being, Georgia will start winning some games with more margin along the way. Just something to keep in mind. Jacob Alexander says, I'm starting to think the BA doesn't really mess with Facebook. I do. I try to. I told you, Facebook is not quite as functional as it once was. That is a thing I can't quite avoid. But I do know a lot of you like spending time over there. So we try to give that. We've started with Facebook comments-wise a little bit recently. Admittedly, we're getting to it pretty late today because we're about to go off the air. But we try to balance it out the best that we can. If you want to go back years ago, when we first started, Facebook as a platform functioned very differently. Facebook was our largest video platform. It is now our smallest, which is fine. That's not a problem. People have just decided other platforms work best for them. And we still look, I'll tell you right now, I'm committed to being on Facebook and a part of Facebook for as long as y'all stay there, for sure. All right. Let's see what else. So let me see if I can scroll past the criticism of me. Not because I'm bothered by it, just because I want to make good use of our time. He says, BA, as someone who was born in Louisiana, never forget that it's almost a given that any Louisiana politician is a crook. Well, they certainly had their experience with that over the course of time. And I do know that people like the drama of all of this. And I'm sure you, Matt, as you say, having the experience you have, you probably get a special kick out of that. But nonetheless, I don't have a huge issue with the governor saying, hey, my constituents want a good coach here. I'm going to see if I can do something to help. I don't have a huge problem with that. I really don't. Because, I mean, technically speaking, the governor, because he's elected, and not just this governor, but any elected official, there's more accountability for them with the people than there is with, like, a lot of these other officials. Like, think about, like, Falcons fans for a minute. The Falcons lost in embarrassing fashion on Sunday. They have no plans to make any changes right now. We don't even really know who's completely in charge in Atlanta and who the decision-making power really rests with. Well, the governor's saying, hey, the buck stops with me. I'm going to get involved. And my hand-picked people on the board of trustees, whatever it's called in Louisiana, they're the ones going to make this coaching hire. Isn't that preferable to the murky anonymity of, well, this guy's the GM, but can he really do anything? And this guy's the head coach, but could he even fire a coordinator if he wanted to? And, this guy still works here, but doesn't have any control. I mean, is that really preferable to what, is going on with the LSU coaching search? I would suggest it's probably not. Brian and Alan talking about the Wintersville Classic. That's Friday. Some games got moved to Thursday, Wintersville's still going to be on Friday, and sometimes you'll see communities do this. They're doing all of Halloween on Thursday tonight so that the entire community can come out. One of the great rivalries in the country and an awesome, awesome experience. And boy, I love the thought of, I don't know. Look, I've always been a Northeast Georgia guy, work in the Atlanta area. But, man, I got a special place in my heart for South Georgia football. I really do. Special place for it indeed. So I think that's great. I think that's awesome and a great way to close it out here today. So I told you, shorter on the comments. I got to go to a meeting. We'll do more tomorrow, and I'll start on Facebook tomorrow to make up for those who didn't think I could spend enough time there today. I do think sometimes when it comes to the cool down, it becomes a situation where no good deed goes unpunished. But nonetheless. Anyway, when it comes to all of that, we appreciate our friends at R.S. Andrews who make the cool down possible. Air conditioning, heating, plumbing, and electric. They are there for you. Heating systems. Mine is on at my house. Yours may be on at yours. That means that you hope it's working the way that it's supposed to. If you have any concerns about that, our friends at R.S. Andrews can get it tuned back up to you, tuned back up to factory fresh specs for you. I can't even speak right now. Clearly, I need to get off the air. Tune back up to factory fresh specs for you, and it may only cost you $99. Check out rsandrews.com for more on that. So thanks for being here for the R.S. Andrews Cool Down. We'll see you back here tomorrow. One big day to keep getting ready for that cocktail party. We'll do it with you. DawgNation Daily presented by Meriwether and Tharp. We'll look forward to talking to you then.